The year is 480 BC on the 7th day of the month. Dawn has not yet broken over the crags of Mount Parnassus. You are a prophetess, an interpreter for the Oracle of Delphi, and your day begins in the cold, sacred water of the Castalian spring. The air is thin and carries a chill that bites at your skin. All around you the sound is of whispering and splashing water. Everyone who comes to question the god Apollo must first be cleansed here. It's a mandatory ritual, a way of washing away the profane dust of the outside world. You watch as supplicants, priests, and city representatives perform their ablutions. Most just wash their hair in the cistern, fed by 7 lion-headed spouts carved into the rock. The water is shockingly cold, but believed to grant poetic inspiration, a quality you will desperately need today. Your job, after all, is to turn divine madness into perfect poetry. For some visitors, however, a simple hair wash isn't enough. You see a man, his face a mask of desperation, undergoing total immersion. A murmur goes through the crowd. He carries the stain of blood guilt, a spiritual weight so heavy only a complete cleansing can begin to lift it. You feel the profound separation between the sacred ground you are on and the messy, violent world everyone has left behind. The Pythia, the priestess herself, undergoes her own rituals elsewhere, drinking from the hidden Cassity spring within the sanctuary. Now, clean and spiritually prepared, you head to your first briefing. You enter a quiet chamber where you meet with the 2 chief priests, the Heres. The atmosphere is hushed and serious. This is not a spiritual meeting, it's a geopolitical one. Laid out before you is the list of the day's supplicants, the people who have travelled hundreds of miles and waited months for this moment. But here's the thing, the queue is not first come, first served. According to custom, Delphians get to ask their questions first. Then come the major city-states and wealthy patrons who have paid enormous sums for the privilege of jumping the line. Your briefing is a careful review of who is asking what. You learn that Athens is here, and so is Sparta. The tension between them is a low hum that everyone can feel. Your mind begins to race, calibrating the political landscape. You understand that the words you help craft today could ease tensions or accidentally light a fuse that burns across the entire Greek world. Your role is much more than a mere translator, you are a diplomat of the divine. You carry the weight of nations on your shoulders before the sun has even fully risen. With the morning briefing complete, your next task begins. It's a form of intelligence gathering, and your field of operation is the sacred way. This is the main path that winds its way up the slope to the Temple of Apollo. You walk it slowly, your eyes taking in every detail. The path is lined with votive offerings and treasuries built by city-states and wealthy individuals. To a normal visitor, this is a beautiful, impressive collection of art. To you, it's a library of political statements and a gallery of human ambition. You are not just looking, you are reading the stories told in marble and bronze. You stop before the Athenian treasury. It's a magnificent marble building, constructed with the spoils from their victory over the Persians at Marathon. It radiates confidence, a bold declaration of Athens' power and divine favor. You feel its cool, smooth surface. It stands as a permanent reminder of their glory. A little further up the path, you see a monument erected by the Spartans. It commemorates a naval victory, not over the Persians, but over the Athenians. The message is just as clear. It speaks of shifting alliances and simmering rivalries. By studying these grand structures, you get a deep sense of the political stakes. You can anticipate the kind of questions that will be asked. You begin to think about the level of ambiguity that will be required. A prophecy that is too clear could be dangerous. But it's not just about the grand gestures. You also notice the smaller, more personal offerings. You see a bronze tripod dedicated by a victorious athlete. You examine a tithe from a fisherman, a portion of a miraculously large catch given in thanks to the god. These humble gifts tell you about the hopes and fears of ordinary people. They remind you that the oracle serves not just kings and generals, but farmers and craftsmen too. Now, after your assessment, you arrive at the final gatekeeper before the temple. It's not a guard or a priest, but a goat. A young goat stands quietly as a priest sprinkles it with freezing cold water. Everyone holds their breath. If the animal shudders from the cold, it's a sign that Apollo is present and willing to speak. You watch the water bead on its coarse hair. For a moment, nothing happens. If it remains still, all consultations for the day are cancelled. The god is not available. This simple act reinforces a crucial truth. Access to the divine is a privilege, not a right you can buy. Suddenly, the goat trembles violently. A collective sigh of relief ripples through the waiting crowd. The god is ready, and so are you. The goat has shuddered. The way is open. You now walk toward the temple itself, leaving the sunlight and the nervous crowds behind. You are about to enter the Vaditong, the inner sanctum, a place whose name literally means not to be entered. This small, sunken chamber is the heart of the mystery, accessible only to the Pythia and a few priests like you. As you descend the stone steps, the temperature drops. The air grows thick, heavy with an almost palpable sense of awe and what some call divine terror. It's a space designed to overwhelm the senses and remind you that you are treading on ground that connects the mortal world to the divine. The first thing that hits you is the smell. A strange, sweet-smelling vapor rises from a fissure in the earth. The ancients called it the pneuma, the breath of the god. You feel it on your skin and in your lungs. It's a pleasant, almost intoxicating aroma that seems to calm your nerves while sharpening your focus. Modern geologists have suggested this vapor might have been a mix of hydrocarbon gases like ethylene, which could induce a euphoric, trance-like state in such an enclosed space. The sounds in the chamber are equally intense. Every shuffle of your feet, every breath you take, seems to echo off the stone walls, amplified and distorted. Your eyes slowly adjust to the dim light. The chamber is a place of deep shadows and powerful symbols. You see the glint of a golden statue of Apollo. You see the sacred gomphalos, the smooth, conical stone believed to mark the very navel, the center of the world. Some records say you can even see the tomb of the god Dionysus, a reminder of the complex and sometimes contradictory nature of the gods. But your focus is drawn to the center of the room. There, seated on a massive bronze tripod placed directly over the source of the pneuma, is the Pythia. She is an older woman, chosen for her life of sobriety and good character. She has already bathed and drunk from the sacred spring. Now she inhales the sweet vapor, preparing to become a vessel for Apollo. You watch as her body begins to change. She enters a state of Genthusismoth, divine possession. Her body might convulse slightly. Her breathing becomes deep and rhythmic. When she speaks, her voice is profoundly altered, transformed by the god. It is not the voice of the woman you know, it is something else entirely. She begins to utter the raw message from Apollo, which can range from chanting to harsh groaning and inarticulate cries. This is the divine static, the raw material you must now shape into meaning. The Pythia's voice fades, and she slumps on the tripod, exhausted. An attendant rushes to her side. For you, the most difficult work of the day is just beginning. You gather with the other prophetai and the chief priests in what could be called a translation huddle. In your hands, you hold the raw utterances of the god, a collection of sounds and cryptic phrases. Your task is to transform this divine gibberish into a formal, elegant, and perfectly structured prophecy. The pressure is immense. You are not just a scribe, you are a co-creator of meaning. According to the traditional view, your role is everything. You take the Pythia's incoherent ravings and, through your poetic skill and political savvy, you craft the oracle from scratch. This model places the entire creative burden on you and the other male priests. However, more modern scholarship challenges this. Some ancient sources describe the Pythia speaking intelligibly, sometimes even in verse herself. In this view, your job is less about creation and more about editing. You are there to record her words, perhaps polishing the grammar and refining the phrasing for clarity and impact. The truth, as you experience it, is likely a collaboration. A plausible synthesis suggests the Pythia provides the core, divine images. She might say something like, "A wall of wood," or "A great empire will fall." She gives you the inspired, central metaphor. Your team then works to refine these concepts. You discuss the possible meanings. You debate the best way to phrase it. You have to ensure the final prophecy is ambiguous enough to be true regardless of the outcome, yet specific enough to feel like a genuine piece of divine counsel. The final, crucial step is casting the message into flawless dactylic hexameter. This is the epic meter of Homer, a poetic form that lends instant authority and gravity to your words. This process is a delicate dance of inspiration, linguistics, and diplomacy. Once the verse is perfect, it is transcribed onto a tablet. You emerge from the temple, blinking in the bright sunlight. The supplicant, perhaps a king or a general, rushes forward, their face a canvas of hope and fear. You hand them the tablet. At this exact moment, all responsibility shifts. The oracle is delivered. It is now the recipient's sole duty to interpret the god's words correctly. If their campaign fails or their city is destroyed, it is not because Apollo was wrong. It is because they, in their mortal foolishness, misunderstood the message. It's a brilliant system for ensuring the oracle is never at fault. Your final task for the day is to archive the question and the response. While no grand library has ever been found at Delphi, the survival of so many oracles in historical texts suggests a robust record-keeping system. You carefully log the day's proceedings. This archive is an invaluable database. It allows you and future interpreters to consult past prophecies, ensuring a consistent voice for Apollo and reinforcing the sanctuary's unmatched authority through the centuries. Your day is done. You are a priest, a poet, a politician, and a historian all in one. And tomorrow, you may have to do it all over again. And so, we survive our first day in the shadow of the Pythia, having translated divine chaos into poetic verse. But our descent into the world of the prophecies has only just begun. The most defining moments are yet to be deciphered. We are marching towards the terrifying psychological ordeal at the Oracle of Delphi and the bitter political fallout from epic misinterpretations that would lead kings to ruin. But a word of warning before we venture further into this sacred madness. The keepers of these chronicles have their own inviolable rituals. Liking this record inscribes your consultation in the official archives of Delphi. Subscribing to the channel ensures you are granted safe passage for all future prophecies. To neglect these duties is to have your own query declared unintelligible, be cast out from the inner sanctum, doomed to wander the footnotes of history, your questions left unanswered for eternity. To avoid such a fate, I implore you make your offering now. Our power to interpret what comes next depends on it. Imagine for a moment that you are a powerful figure in ancient Greece, perhaps a king, a general, or a wealthy statesman. You have a question that could decide the fate of your city, your army, your very life. You have traveled for weeks to reach the sacred slopes of Mount Parnassus. Now, in the year 550 BCE, you stand inside the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. The air inside is cool, a welcome relief from the sun. It's heavy with the scent of burnt offerings and something else, a sweet, intoxicating smell you can't quite place. You are here to ask the Pythia, Apollo's oracle, for guidance. Your heart pounds in your chest, a slow, heavy drum against your ribs. The fate of thousands rests on the words you are about to receive. But here's the thing. In the high-stakes world of Greek politics, clarity was a very dangerous thing. A direct, unambiguous answer from the oracle would have been a political disaster waiting to happen. For instance, say you ask if you will win an upcoming battle. If the oracle says yes, and you proceed to lose, the temple's reputation is shattered. Its priests could face retribution from angry leaders who felt they were misled by a god. Now imagine the opposite. You ask the same question, and the oracle predicts your crushing defeat. In many Greek city-states, that kind of prediction could be seen as treason, a deliberate attempt to undermine morale. It was an insult to you, the king, and your entire army. For the priests of Delphi, a clear answer was a losing game. So they developed a different strategy, one rooted in institutional self-preservation. Ambiguity became their greatest tool. This wasn't just a cynical political calculation, though. According to historians, it also reflected a deep-seated theological belief. Divine wisdom wasn't meant to be a simple instruction manual. It was a riddle, a puzzle given by the gods to humanity. It was your job as a mortal to struggle with the meaning, to meditate on it, and to ultimately take responsibility for your own interpretation. This inherent gap between the divine and the mortal was reinforced by every cryptic phrase. The priests weren't just protecting their jobs, they were protecting the mysterious nature of the gods themselves. Somehow, they managed to build an institution that lasted for 1,000 years on answers that were never really answers at all. This brings us to the most famous example of Delphic ambiguity, a story so perfect it has become a masterclass in plausible deniability. Let's set the scene. You are no longer just any Greek leader. Congratulations, you are now Croesus, the fabulously wealthy king of Lydia. It is the middle of the 6th century BCE, and your kingdom is prosperous, but you are ambitious. You look eastward, towards the growing power of the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great. You feel the pull of legacy, the desire to expand your great empire. But war with Persia is a monumental risk. Before you commit your armies, you need a sign, a promise of divine favor. So you send your emissaries on the long journey to Delphi, their carts laden with gold and silver gifts to win the gods' attention. You have spared no expense to get the best possible answer. After the proper sacrifices are made, your question is put to the Pythia: will Croesus be victorious if he wages war on Persia? In the stillness of the sanctuary, your messengers wait. The air feels charged, every rustle of the priest's robes echoing off the stone walls. Finally, the answer comes, carefully crafted by the temple interpreters and delivered in poetic verse. The Pythia tells your men that if you cross the Halys River, you will destroy a great empire. Your messengers race back to your palace, their feet light with the good news. You hear the words and a smile spreads across your face. The meaning seems obvious. The great empire to be destroyed is, of course, the Persian one. Blinded by your own ambition, you hear exactly what you want to hear. The prophecy feels like a guarantee of success, a divine green light for your military campaign. You gather your vast army, the cool metal of your armor a comforting weight on your shoulders. You can almost taste the victory as you lead your soldiers across the Halys River, the boundary between your kingdom and the Persian sphere of influence. The campaign that follows is a catastrophe. Your army is outmaneuvered and crushed by the forces of Cyrus the Great. You are captured, your kingdom is absorbed into the Persian Empire, and your name becomes a cautionary tale for centuries to come. You did in fact destroy a great empire, just as the oracle predicted. You destroyed your own. The prophecy was a work of art. It was factually unassailable, completely true no matter what the outcome. The genius was in its omission. By not specifying each empire would fall, the priests at Delphi offered you hope while retaining perfect deniability. Later, when you managed to send a complaint back to the temple, their defense was flawless. According to the historian Herodotus, the priests calmly explained that the prophecy was correct. The fault, they insisted, was yours. You were the one who failed to interpret it properly. If you had been wiser, you would have sent a second question asking specifically which empire the god meant. The burden of failure was shifted entirely from the oracle to you, the supplicant. This strategy made the oracle essentially unfalsifiable. A prophecy that could be reinterpreted to fit any outcome was a prophecy that could never be wrong. This is how Delphi maintained its prestige for so long. It didn't matter if your campaign succeeded or failed, the priests could always look back at the original wording and show how the god's wisdom was true all along. It was your human arrogance or foolishness that got in the way. Through it all, the system was protected, and to achieve this, the priests had a sophisticated linguistic toolkit at their disposal, allowing them to weave ambiguity into the very grammar of their predictions. Now, let's look at how this was done. The Delphic priests didn't just rely on simple vagueness, they used a range of linguistic tricks to build their riddles. One of their favorite methods was what we call syntactic ambiguity. This is where the grammatical structure of a sentence allows it to have multiple, often opposite meanings. A classic example was the oracle given to Pyrrhus of Epirus, a Greek king who considered waging war on the rising power of Rome. He was told, "Vgaio te, eacida Romanos vince posa." You hear this Latin phrase, and if you are Pyrrhus, your heart leaps. It can be translated as, "I say that you, descendant of Aeschines, can conquer the Romans." A clear endorsement, but the grammar is a beautiful trap. Because of the word order, it can also be translated as, "I say that the Romans can conquer you, descendant of Aeschines." It means both things and neither. The sentence structure itself creates the ambiguity. It gives you, the hopeful king, the permission you crave while giving the temple complete cover. The outcome of your war against Rome doesn't matter, because whatever happens, the prophecy will have come true. It's a perfect linguistic hedge, a masterstroke of divine and political communication. You walk away feeling confident, never realizing the words you just heard predict your doom just as easily as they predict your triumph. Another tool was lexical ambiguity, which involves using words that have multiple meanings. Let's return to your other life as Croesus for a moment. You were given a second prophecy, one that told you your reign would end when a mule came to rule the Medes. You probably laughed when you heard it. The idea of a half-donkey, half-horse animal sitting on a throne sounds like a physical impossibility. You feel secure, thinking your downfall will never come. But you've misunderstood. The priests were using the word mule as a metaphor. After your defeat, the interpreters were happy to explain its hidden meaning. The Persian king, Cyrus the Great, was the mule. He was of mixed parentage with a Persian father and a Median mother. He was a metaphorical mule. This kind of symbolism was common. The prophecies often spoke in images that required a significant conceptual leap. The level of ambiguity was also carefully adjusted depending on who was asking. If you were a powerful and potentially volatile ruler like Croesus, you received the most cryptic and layered responses. The priests were managing risk. However, if you were the leader of a small, friendly state asking about a simple religious festival, you might receive a much more straightforward answer. This careful tailoring allowed Delphi to navigate the incredibly complex web of alliances in the Greek world. It maintained its status as a neutral Panhellenic institution by allowing every visitor, in a way, to hear what they wanted to hear, ensuring its own survival and influence for centuries. But this raises a central question that historians have debated for ages. When you receive a prophecy at Delphi, whose voice are you really hearing? How much of the message is the Pythia's divine inspiration, and how much is the calculated craft of the male priests, the 458, who served as the official interpreters? The truth was likely a collaboration. One traditional view held that the Pythia, overwhelmed by divine fumes, spoke in chaotic, incoherent shrieks. The rational male priests then took this raw material and shaped it into polished, ambiguous verse. It was a simple case of wild female energy being tamed by male intellect. A more modern, revisionist view suggests the opposite. It argues that the Pythia was a highly skilled and articulate professional. Her state of divine possession didn't disable her speech, it enabled it, allowing her to channel the god's voice fluently. But the most likely scenario, which we can call the collaborative model, lies somewhere in the middle. The process may have gone something like this. The Pythia enters her trance. In this state, she provides the core divine images, the central metaphors, the raw stuff of prophecy. Then, the priests act like a modern editorial board. They take her inspired words, refine the language, check it for political safety, and polish the final verse to achieve the perfect level of ambiguity. It was a partnership between ecstatic revelation and calculated composition. Perhaps the greatest example of this entire system in action comes from Athens during the Second Persian invasion in 480 BCE. Imagine you are an Athenian citizen. The largest army the world has ever seen is marching towards your home. The mood in the city is thick with fear. You can almost feel the ground vibrating with the approach of 1 million enemy soldiers. You and your fellow citizens send to Delphi for help, and the first answer you get back is pure terror, predicting utter destruction. Desperate, you plead for a second prophecy. This one is cryptic. It promises that a wall of wood alone shall be uncaptured, but ends with the chilling line, "Divine Salamis, you will be the death of mothers' sons." This sparked a ferocious debate in the Athenian assembly. The air in the Pix, the meeting hill, is hot and tense as citizens argue over the city's survival. The elders argue that the wooden wall must be the old wooden palisade that once protected the Acropolis. They advise everyone to barricade themselves there. Other professional oracle chanters point to the line about Salamis as a clear prediction of a naval defeat. It seems hopeless. Then, the statesman Themistocles stands up. He offers a brilliant reinterpretation. The wooden wall, he argues, is a metaphor. It isn't a fence, it's the Athenian navy, the fleet of wooden ships. More importantly, he dissects that final line. If the god meant to predict a disaster for Athens, he would have called the island hateful Salamis. By calling it Divine Salamis, the god was hinting that the mother's sons who were destined to die there were not Athenian sons, but Persian sons. His logic was so powerful it swayed the assembly. The Athenians abandoned their city, put their trust in their fleet, and won a decisive, civilization-saving victory at the Battle of Salamis. The ambiguous oracle didn't dictate a course of action. It provided the sacred framework for a political debate, and in the end, victory belonged not just to the navy, but to the man who best understood the art of the riddle. You are back at the sanctuary at Delphi. You've seen the Pythia, a woman chosen by the gods, speak in tongues. Her voice, echoing in the sacred chamber, seems to hold the key to your future. But here's the thing. The raw, unfiltered words of the Pythia were not the final product. They were just the beginning. Imagine her pronouncements as uncut gems, full of potential but needing a master craftsman to reveal their true brilliance. The real work, the part that shaped empires and sealed fates, happened away from the incense and the drama. It happened in the quiet rooms where the priests, the true interpreters of Apollo, began their craft. Imagine you are one of these priests. Your day begins not with prayer, but with research. In the cool, stone corridors behind the main temple, you enter the archives. While historians have yet to uncover the physical remains of this library, the evidence of its existence is overwhelming. Hundreds of prophecies, recorded and preserved over centuries, speak to a tradition of meticulous record-keeping. Your task is to consult this vast history. The air smells faintly of aging papyrus and dust. Your fingers trace the lines of ink on a scroll, a message delivered to a king 300 years ago. It feels fragile, almost weightless in your hands. Here in the archives, you aren't just looking for answers, you are looking for patterns. A nearby city-state wants to found a new colony. You pull up the records for every other colonization request. You note the language used in the successful prophecies, the structure of the verses, the specific warnings given. This isn't about inventing something new, it's about maintaining a divine consistency that spans 1,000 years. The weight of that legacy settles on your shoulders. Every new prophecy you help shape must feel like it came from the same timeless, all-knowing God. The pressure is immense, but through it all you feel a sense of purpose. You are a guardian of Apollo's eternal voice. So, you spend your mornings surrounded by the successes and failures of the past. You see how a poorly worded prophecy led to a disastrous military campaign. You read another that, through its clever phrasing, saved a city from famine. It's a slow, painstaking process. The only sound is the soft rustle of scrolls being unrolled and the distant murmur of pilgrims in the courtyard. This job is less about divine frenzy and more about scholarly diligence. You are building a foundation of precedent. This research ensures that when the final prophecy is delivered, it is grounded, consistent, and powerful. You are not merely a scribe, you are an architect of divine wisdom, ensuring Apollo's advice today echoes his advice from centuries ago. Now, your research in the dusty archives is complete. You have a sense of the historical context for the question at hand. But a prophecy is more than just words on a page. It is a living, breathing event, and it requires more than just historical data. Before the pilgrim is even allowed to ask their question, you must consult other, more immediate omens. You now enter the world of visceral divination, where the answers are not spoken, but revealed in flesh and flight. You leave the quiet of the library and step out into the crisp mountain air, heading towards a small, smoking altar. The first and most critical test is about to begin. It's called haruspicy, the art of reading entrails. In front of you, another priest holds a nervous goat, the required sacrifice for a consultation. The pilgrim who brought it watches with a tense expression, their future hanging in the balance. The air is thick with the smell of burning barley and the sharp, animal scent of the goat. As the sacrifice is made, there is a moment of profound silence. Your focus is singular. You lean over the still warm carcass, the heat rising to meet your face. Your job is to examine the liver. This single organ, according to belief, is a mirror of the divine mood. Don't worry, the process is methodical, not chaotic. You look for its color, its shape, its texture. A healthy, smooth, well-formed liver is a good sign. It means Apollo is receptive. The god is willing to listen. But if you find any blemishes, any strange discolorations, or an unnatural shape, the outlook is grim. The session might be postponed, or the prophecy will be framed with a sense of foreboding. Imagine the impact on the waiting pilgrim. You give a subtle nod to your fellow priest. The liver is perfect. A wave of relief washes over the person who asked the question. The first hurdle has been cleared, but there are still other signs to consider. As you wipe your hands, you might look to the sky. This is ornithomancy, the interpretation of the flight of birds. A flock of eagles soaring to the right could be a sign of strength and victory. A lone raven croaking on the left might suggest trickery or delay. These signs are like divine footnotes, adding layers of nuance to the main event. You are gathering data from every possible source: the ancient texts, the fresh sacrifice, the patterns in the sky. All of this happens before the Pythia even enters her trance. Through it all, you are building a complete picture, ensuring the final message is not just a guess, but a conclusion drawn from a dozen different divine conversations. 670. With the omens read and the archives consulted, you now have a framework. The mood is set, the historical context is understood. Now, you and the other priests retreat to a quiet chamber to perform the most delicate task of all, composing the prophecy itself. This is where you transform from a researcher and an observer into a poet. In this room, lit by the soft, flickering glow of oil lamps, you are not just writing a message, you are crafting a piece of sacred literature designed to resonate deep within the Greek soul. The space is quiet, the air still and warm, filled with the faint scent of olive oil from the lamps. Your primary tools here are not just your own intellect, but the entire canon of Greek religious texts. You are deeply familiar with the Homeric hymns and the works of the poet Hesiod. These texts are the shared cultural language of your world. They contain the familiar stories of gods and heroes, the established descriptions of divine power, and the rhythmic cadence of epic poetry. You reach for these texts now. Your goal is to frame the prophecy using language and imagery that everyone will instantly recognize. It's like a modern songwriter using a familiar sample to create an emotional connection. By using this shared vocabulary, you make the prophecy feel both immediate and eternal. Imagine a king has asked about a coming war. Instead of a simple, "you will win," you might craft a verse that compares him to Achilles, using the same epithets Homer used. The feel of the stylus in your hand is smooth and cool as you carefully etch the Greek letters onto a wax tablet. You murmur the lines aloud, testing the rhythm, ensuring it has the proper weight and gravity. This process elevates the message from a mere prediction to a piece of art. It integrates the pilgrim's personal crisis into the grand, sweeping narrative of Hellenic myth. For the person receiving it, this makes the experience incredibly powerful. Their personal struggle is now part of the great cosmic story. But here's the thing, not every question required a grand, epic poem. The sanctuary at Delphi was a practical place, after all. For simpler yes or no questions, or for those who couldn't wait for the next official consultation day, there was another option: claromantia, or divination by lots. You might be asked to perform this for a farmer wondering if he should plant his olives early. You would reach into a small bag and pull out one of two beans, one black and one white. White for yes, black for no. It was quick, simple, and efficient. This flexibility shows how the oracle managed to serve everyone, from kings planning invasions to farmers planning their harvests. It was a sophisticated operation capable of delivering both epic poetry and straightforward binary answers. You have gathered omens, you have consulted archives, and you have steeped your language in sacred tradition. Now you arrive at the final, and perhaps most powerful, tool in your priestly kit. This tool is invisible, weightless, and yet it has the power to build and break empires. It is your masterful command of linguistics, of grammar and syntax. In the quiet of the composition room, you wrestle with the very structure of your sentences. The future of a kingdom could hinge on your choice of a verb tense, or the placement of a single noun. The mental strain is a palpable thing, a pressure you can feel behind your eyes. The goal here is often not clarity, but a very specific and deliberate form of ambiguity. This is the secret to the oracle's legendary infallibility. You aren't trying to be vague for the sake of being mysterious. You are constructing a statement that is balanced on a knife's edge, capable of being interpreted in at least two ways. This ensures that, no matter the outcome, the oracle will be proven correct. The burden of correct interpretation is cleverly shifted from you, the priest, to the person who asked the question. It was their failure to understand, not Apollo's failure to predict. Let's look at a classic example that scholars still discuss. A king asks if he will conquer his enemy. You could craft the famous line, which in its original language was a masterpiece of grammatical ambiguity. A phrase like, say that you, the king, the enemy can conquer. The structure is perfectly balanced. It could mean the king will conquer the enemy, or the enemy will conquer the king. It is a statement of pure fact, a coin toss presented as a profound truth. The king, hearing what he wants to hear, marches off to war with confidence. If he wins, the oracle was right. If he loses, the oracle was also right, he simply understood it incorrectly. This linguistic skill also extended to wordplay. According to the historian Herodotus, King Croesus of Lydia was told that if he attacked Persia, he would destroy a great empire. He did, and a great empire was destroyed, his own. Another time, the oracle told Cyrus the Great that his conquest would be assured once a mule sat on the Median throne. This seemed impossible, but the truth was, Cyrus himself was the mule, a term used for someone of mixed heritage, as his mother was Median royalty and his father was a Persian commoner. You see how it works. These tools, the archives, the omens, the literature, and the grammar, all came together in what we can call the prophecy formula. It was this formula that made Delphi not just a place of mystic utterances, but a resilient and powerful institution that endured for 1,000 years. Suppose for a moment that you have followed the advice of the gods. You gathered your armies, you spent your treasury, and you marched into a glorious battle, certain of your victory. But you lost. You are now standing in the immediate aftermath of that crushing defeat. The air is thick with the coppery smell of blood and the bitter scent of smoke from burning siege engines. You feel the cold dread pooling in your gut as you look over the faces of your surviving soldiers. For them, and for you, the prophecy failed. The central question that would echo through the stone halls of your palace was simple: who was to blame? In ancient Greece, when a prophecy led to disaster, assigning blame followed a very specific and convenient hierarchy. It was a system designed, above all else, to protect the oracle itself. At the very top, the god Apollo was considered infallible. His wisdom was perfect, his sight absolute. Therefore, the god could never be at fault. So if it wasn't the god's fault, whose was it? Don't worry. The priests at Delphi had a ready answer for you. You stand before them in the cool, quiet sanctuary, the silence a stark contrast to the screams of the battlefield you just left. They explain to you, in calm and measured tones, that the error was not in the message, but in your understanding. The fault was almost always placed squarely on the shoulders of the supplicant. That's you. According to the interpreters, it was your own human flaws that led you astray. Perhaps it was your pride, your hubris, that made you hear only what you wanted to hear. Or maybe it was your impatience, your eagerness for glory, that caused you to rush into action without truly contemplating the oracle's layered meaning. You can feel the frustration building inside you, the injustice of it all. You were given a riddle in a divine tongue, and now you are being condemned for not solving it correctly. This elegant solution ensured that every failure only reinforced the oracle's power. It became a lesson not in the oracle's fallibility, but in your own mortal limitations. Let's look at one of the most famous examples of this blame game in action. In the kingdom of Epirus, a rugged, mountainous land in northwestern Greece, it is the early 3rd century BCE. You are its king, Pyrrhus. You are a descendant of the legendary hero Achilles, and you carry that ambition in your blood. You pace the floors of your throne room, the stone cool beneath your leather sandals. Your gaze is fixed eastward, across the sea, toward the rising power of Rome. You have a powerful army and a brilliant military mind. You feel the weight of your legacy, the burning desire to carve out an empire greater than any seen before. All you need is the blessing of the gods to set your grand design in motion. So, like countless leaders before you, you prepare a lavish gift and send your envoys on the long journey to Delphi. As Pyrrhus, you are standing before the Delphic temple, the mountain air crisp and cool against your skin. The scent of laurel leaves and burnt offerings hangs heavy in the sanctuary. Your envoys return with the Pythia's words, and they echo in your mind with a thrilling clarity. Iote, Aesida, Romanos Vinciposi. I say that you, son of Aeacus, the Romans can conquer. In that moment, your heart soars. The grammar of the phrase is cleverly, beautifully ambiguous. It could mean you can conquer the Romans, or it could mean the Romans can conquer you. But blinded by ambition, you hear only the first meaning. It is the confirmation you craved, the divine green light for your invasion of Italy. Congratulations, you've just launched a massive military campaign. As a soldier in Pyrrhus's army, you are marching onto an Italian battlefield. The sun beats down on your bronze helmet, and the air is humid and still. You fight with incredible ferocity, and through sheer tactical genius, your king leads you to victory against the mighty Roman legions. But as the dust settles, you look around. The ground is littered with the bodies of your friends, your comrades. The sound of celebration is thin, drowned out by the cries of the wounded. You won the day, but the cost was staggering. Your unit has been decimated, your supplies are dwindling, and you are thousands of miles from home. Pyrrhus won several such battles. Each time he paid an immense price in men and resources. After one particularly bloody victory, he famously remarked that one more such victory would utterly undo him. This gave us the phrase we still use today, a Pyrrhic victory, a success that comes at such a devastating cost it is tantamount to defeat. As the king himself, you are sitting in your campaign tent late at night. The flickering lamplight casts long shadows on the walls. You can hear the cold Italian rain tapping against the canvas. The prophecy was true in the most technical, painful sense. You could conquer the Romans in battle, but you couldn't survive the conquering. Your campaign ultimately failed, and you retreated back to Greece, your army shattered and your treasury empty. This was the brutal reality when interpretations went wrong. For a supplicant like Pyrrhus or King Croesus of Lydia before him, misreading the divine message was catastrophic. It could lead to the loss of a kingdom, a lifetime of exile, or a lonely death on a forgotten battlefield. As a young student in an Athenian library many years later, you unroll a heavy papyrus scroll, the smell of old paper and ink filling your nose. You read the stories of these great kings and their epic failures. These accounts were not just historical records, they were potent warnings passed down through generations. They taught every Greek that when you deal with the gods, you must tread carefully, because the stakes were nothing less than your entire world. The human impact was clear. A single, ambiguous sentence could unravel an empire. Now, the failures of men like Pyrrhus were chalked up to their own personal flaws. But here's the thing. There were whispers of a different kind of failure, one born not of misinterpretation but of deliberate manipulation. As a wealthy merchant in the bustling port of Piraeus, you might sit in a tavern, the air filled with the scent of salty sea air, roasting fish and spilled wine. You listen to the low murmur of conversations around you, the gossip of sailors and politicians. You hear tales that the Pythia's words could sometimes be influenced not by the gods, but by the heavy weight of gold. Accusations of corruption and bribery were a quiet, steady undercurrent in the oracle's long history. The most famous case involved a powerful Athenian family, the Alcmaeonids. In the 6th century BCE, you are a member of this noble family, but you are living in exile. Your city, Athens, is under the control of a tyrant, and you have been banished. You pace the courtyard of your foreign villa, the taste of injustice bitter in your mouth. You have immense wealth, but not the army to retake your home, so you devise a more subtle plan. Evidence strongly suggests that the Alcmaeonids used their vast fortune to bribe the Pythia. They effectively put the oracle on their payroll, turning a divine institution into a tool for political lobbying. What they found was that repetition was key. The Spartans, austere and disciplined rivals to Athens, were the target. You are a Spartan envoy, a man of few words and great duty. You have been sent to Delphi to ask the god for guidance on a matter of state. You make the journey, present your offering, and receive the Pythia's answer. But before she addresses your question, she gives you a strange command. First, free the Athenians. You return to Sparta and report this. A few months later, another envoy goes for another reason and receives the exact same message. First, free the Athenians. This happened again and again and again. In the Spartan assembly hall, the scene unfolds. The room is stark, the air cool and still. You see the elders listening as envoy after envoy reports the same divine command. At first, they were reluctant to interfere in Athens' affairs. But the constant, unrelenting pressure from the most respected religious authority in their world slowly wore them down. Eventually, they concluded that this must truly be Apollo's will. In the end, the Spartans marched on Athens and overthrew the tyrant. This paved the way for the reforms that would establish Athenian democracy. So next time you think about democracy's origins, remember the Alcmaeonids. They showed the ancient world that sometimes the most effective weapon isn't a spear, but a well-placed and endlessly repeated phrase, purchased for a price. Your freedom, it turns out, was sponsored. The oracle's influence wasn't just for sale to the highest bidder, it also picked sides in the great conflicts of the age. On the eve of the Peloponnesian War, the titanic, decades-long struggle between Athens and Sparta, you are a Spartan hoplite. You sit on a simple wooden stool in your barracks. The air is cool and smells of leather and olive oil. You are methodically sharpening the iron tip of your long spear, the rhythmic scrape of the whetstone the only sound in the quiet room. You and your fellow soldiers are the most feared warriors in Greece. But Athens has a mighty navy and a vast empire. The coming war feels uncertain, daunting. But then, your leaders consult Delphi, and the message they bring back is unlike the usual riddles. There is no ambiguity, no clever wordplay. You gather with your comrades in the public assembly to hear the news. The air is tense with anticipation. The envoy announces the Pythia's words, and a hush falls over the crowd. She declared that if the Spartans fought with all their might, victory would be theirs. And then came the truly stunning part. She said that Apollo himself would aid them, whether they called for his help or not. For you, a devout and disciplined soldier, this changes everything. This is no longer just a war for dominance. It is a holy mission with a divine guarantee of success. This unambiguous prophecy had a massive impact. It galvanized Spartan morale and served as a divine justification for their aggression. In Athens, a short time after the war begins, the city is overcrowded, hot, and suffocating. A terrifying plague has broken out within the city walls. The air is heavy with the stench of sickness and the constant sound of funeral pyres crackling. You feel a growing sense of despair. Your friends and family are dying around you, and you feel utterly helpless. Soon, whispers begin to circulate, spreading faster than the disease itself. People remembered the oracle's promise to Sparta. They saw this devastating plague not as a natural disaster, but as the direct fulfillment of Apollo's vow to fight for their enemies. Your city's confidence was shattered, not just by war and disease, but by the chilling belief that a powerful god was actively working to destroy you. Through it all, the oracle had to survive. Its long-term success depended on its ability to manage these high-stakes situations and, crucially, to manage its failures. As a young priest, an acolyte learning the trade within Delphi's sacred precinct, you are taught the art of post hoc reinterpretation. That is a fancy way of saying you learn how to reread a prophecy after the fact to show it was right all along. This rhetorical spin was the oracle's ultimate defense mechanism. It was a masterclass in public relations and blame shifting. This brings us to our old friend, King Croesus, in his final days. You are Croesus, now a prisoner of the Persian king, Cyrus. The feel of the cold, heavy chains on your wrists is a constant reminder of your failure. You are bitter, confused. You sent messengers back to Delphi to demand an explanation. The explanation that comes back is a stroke of genius. The priests calmly inform you that the prophecy was perfectly accurate. A great empire was destroyed, they said. It just happened to be your own. In that moment, you understand the cruel, unassailable logic of the gods. The prophecy was never wrong. Your own arrogance and ambition were the problem. The failure was a lesson, reframing a disastrous prediction as a profound insight into the limits of mortal understanding and ensuring that you, and not the god, would take the fall. 6:4. For most people, the idea of a Greek oracle brings to mind one specific place, Delphi. The mind conjures a priestess on a tripod, breathing in sacred vapors and delivering cryptic prophecies from the god Apollo. And for good reason. Delphi was the most famous, the most influential oracle of the ancient world, but it was far from the only one. The truth was, the Greek world was dotted with places you could go to seek divine knowledge. Each had its own unique method, its own flavor of prophecy. It was a whole marketplace of divination, and your choice of oracle said a lot about the kind of answer you were looking for. So, let's move beyond the familiar fumes of Delphi as we begin a grand tour of the other oracles of Greece, where the gods spoke not just in riddles, but through rustling leaves, terrifying visions, and even the silent voices of the dead. Imagine you've traveled for weeks, not to the mountains of Phocis, but to a remote valley in Epirus in northwestern Greece. You find your way to the ancient sanctuary of Dodona. In this sacred space, you feel a cool breeze move through the branches of a colossal ancient oak tree. This isn't just any tree, this is the dwelling place of Zeus himself, the king of the gods. Your entire journey, your hopes and your anxieties have all led you to this spot beneath its sprawling canopy. You're not waiting for a priestess to speak, you're waiting for the tree to speak. The air smells of damp earth and old wood, a primal and calming scent. According to historians, this was one of the oldest oracles, perhaps even older than Delphi. The method here was beautifully simple and deeply connected to the natural world. Priests, known as the Shaloi, would interpret the will of Zeus from the sound of the wind moving through the sacred oak's leaves. It was a language of rustles, whispers, and sighs. You stand there, your head tilted upwards, trying to hear a message in the shivering foliage. It's a profound exercise in patience. You have to quiet your own mind completely to hear the subtle voice of the divine. This experience was about attuning your senses to the world around you. Somehow, they managed to make it even more complex. The priests at Dodona didn't just listen to the leaves. Over time, other sounds were added to their interpretive toolkit. You might hear the gentle cooing of sacred doves nesting in the oak's branches, or the soft murmur of a spring that flowed from its roots. And then there was the most peculiar element. Imagine a series of bronze cauldrons hung carefully from the branches so that they were just close enough to touch. When the wind blew, they would knock against each other, creating a continuous resonant chime. The sound would fill the air, a constant, low humming that you feel deep in your chest. The human impact of this was immense. It turned seeking guidance into a full sensory experience, a concert of natural and man-made sounds that you had to trust an interpreter to decode for you. The interpreter's role at Dodona was fundamentally different from that of the poets at Delphi. Here in the cool air of Epirus, the priests and later priestesses called the Pleiades were not crafting verse, they were decoders of a non-verbal language. You would pose your question, perhaps written on a small lead tablet, and they would listen intently to the chorus of sounds around you. They would listen to the leaves, the doves, the spring, and the bronze chimes, and from that symphony of nature, they would piece together an answer. The guidance you received felt raw and direct from the world itself, less filtered through human artistry and more like understanding the earth's own speech. Now, let's leave the gentle sounds of the forest behind and travel across the sea and sand. Imagine you've made a long, perilous journey into the vast emptiness of the Egyptian desert. In the year 331 BCE, you are not just a simple pilgrim, you are Alexander the Great. You have just conquered Egypt, and you are pushing your army towards the heart of the Persian Empire. The sun is relentless, and the heat shimmers off the endless dunes. You feel the grit of sand on your skin and the dryness in your throat. Your destination is a remote patch of green in the middle of this wasteland, the Siwa oasis, home to the Oracle of Ammon, a god the Greeks identified with their own Zeus. You arrive at the oasis, and the sudden coolness of the palm groves is a welcome relief. The air is heavy with the scent of dates and water. You approach the temple, not for an ambiguous poem or a rustling leaf, but for something far more concrete. You seek confirmation of your destiny, a divine stamp of approval for your monumental ambition. As you enter, the chief priest of Ammon meets you. He looks past your generals and your royal guards. He looks directly at you, but he doesn't greet you as a king or a conqueror. or even as Alexander. According to the records, he addresses you with a new title, Son of Ammon. This was a profoundly different kind of oracular experience. There was no poetry to decode, no natural signs to interpret. It was a clear, direct, and transformative pronouncement. For you, as Alexander, this changes everything. This declaration legitimizes your rule over Egypt, elevating you from a foreign conqueror to a rightful pharaoh, a living god. It was a powerful act of political validation. The human impact was enormous, not just for you, but for your entire empire. Your divine parentage was now a confirmed fact, silencing doubters and cementing your authority. It shows how an oracle could be a kingmaker, shaping history with a few simple, carefully chosen words. But not all oracles were about raw nature or grand political statements. In some places, prophecy was a form of high art. Your travels now take you to Didyma, near the wealthy coastal city of Miletus, in modern-day Turkey. In the sun-baked landscape of Ionia, you find yourself standing before the immense temple of Apollo. The air smells of sea salt and hot stone. You feel small here, dwarfed by the sheer scale of the columns that rise towards the sky. You are a merchant, perhaps, worried about an upcoming voyage, and you have come seeking guidance from a family famous for their prophetic skill. This oracle was run for generations by a hereditary priestly family, the Branchidae, and they had a reputation to uphold. Here the process was more structured, more refined than at other sites. You would present your query, and somewhere in the temple's inner sanctum, a priestess would receive a divine message from Apollo. But you would never hear her words directly. Her raw utterance was taken by the priests, the men of the Branchidae family, and they began their true work. They were not just interpreters, they were poets and literary craftsmen. Their job was to take the divine spark and transform it into a polished, elaborate, and often very long prophecy. You wait for hours, feeling the cool marble beneath your sandals, until finally you are presented with your answer. What you receive is not a simple yes or no, nor is it a whisper of leaves. It's a work of art. The prophecy is delivered in hexameter verse, the same meter as Homer's epics. It's filled with beautiful language, complex metaphors, and frustratingly obscure allusions. Evidence suggests this house style was a point of pride for the Branchidae. They were known for their literary flair. The human impact was that you left Didyma with not so much an answer as a puzzle. You had to spend the next several weeks trying to figure out what the beautiful, winding poem actually meant for your shipping business. It was divine guidance filtered through the lens of human creativity. Through it all, these experiences, while different, had a certain distance. But what if you wanted to cut out the middleman entirely? What if you wanted to face the god yourself? For that, you would have to go to Lebedea. Imagine you are standing at the edge of a dark opening in the earth. This is the Oracle of Trophonius, and it promises the most direct and most terrifying oracular experience available. For days you have been preparing, performing rituals, and living in a special building. Now, the moment has come. The air feels cold and damp, smelling of wet soil and something ancient and unsettling. The priests offer you 2 cups of water from 2 magical springs. One is the spring of Letha, or forgetfulness, to wipe your mind clean. The other is the spring of Mnemosyne, or memory, so you will remember what you are about to see. The water is shockingly cold as you drink it. Then you are guided to the chasm. You lie down, and suddenly you are pulled violently by your feet down into the suffocating darkness. Your descent, or catabasis, into the earth is a chaotic blur. In the pitch blackness of the chasm, you are subjected to a barrage of experiences. It's an assault on your senses. There are flashes of light, incomprehensible noises, and a feeling of being twisted and turned by an unseen force. Historians describe it as a profound psychological ordeal designed to break down the barriers of your conscious mind. After what feels like an eternity, you are ejected from the hole feet first, the same way you went in. You are dazed, terrified, and utterly disoriented. They say that no one who went through this ordeal ever smiled again. Now comes the most important part of your journey at Trophonius. The priests carry you to a special chair, the throne of memory. You sit there, trembling, the cool stone a stark contrast to the racing of your heart. And here is the critical difference. The priests do not give you a prophecy. They don't interpret anything for you, they simply ask you to recount what you saw and heard in the darkness. They act less like prophets and more like therapists. They guide you, helping you make sense of the traumatic vision you just experienced. The human impact was that the answer came from within you. The oracle's function was to create a crisis so profound that your own inner knowledge was forced to the surface. Don't worry, they would then help you piece it all back together. If descending into a terrifying hole in the ground wasn't your style, there was one other place you could go for a deeply personal consultation. Imagine you're at the Necromantian of Acheron, the Oracle of the Dead. You haven't come to speak to a god, but to the soul of someone you've lost. You have spent days in preparation, isolated in dim chambers, eating a sparse diet of beans and barley bread designed to heighten your senses. The air is still and musty, smelling of old stone and the faint, sweet scent of decay. The silence is absolute, broken only by the sound of your own breathing. You are finally led by the priests down into a subterranean vault. In the flickering light of a single torch, you see the shadows dance on the damp walls. Your heart pounds with a mixture of fear and hope. Here, after the final rituals, you are supposed to witness an apparition of the dead. Perhaps you see the faint, shimmering outline of your ancestor. The challenge, of course, was communication. The shades of the dead rarely spoke in clear language. The messages were fleeting, non-verbal, a gesture, a feeling, a hazy image that would burn itself into your memory. The priests were facilitators for this eerie communion, but the heavy burden of interpretation fell squarely on your shoulders. You had to decide what that ghostly vision meant for your life. So you can see, the ancient Greeks had a rich and varied menu of options for seeking the truth. When you look beyond Delphi, you find a fascinating spectrum of interpretation. At Dodona, you trusted a priest to decode the language of nature for you. At Siwa, a priest acted as a validator, delivering a clear pronouncement that could legitimize a king. At Didyma, you received a beautiful but obscure poem, a piece of divine art crafted by a priestly artist. And at the terrifying ordeals of Trophonius and the Necromantion, the priest was a ritual guide, a therapist who helped you interpret your own direct, often traumatic, personal experience. It shows us that getting answers, whether from a god or from within, has never been a simple process. Sometimes you just need someone to help you listen to the world around you, and sometimes you just need to be shaken until the answer falls out. For centuries, the world of the ancient Greeks was a place of divine whispers and sacred signs. You lived your life according to the patterns of the gods. Your future was something revealed, not chosen. It was a truth you received from the mouths of oracles, carried on the wind from the peaks of holy mountains. But change was coming, not with the crash of thunder, but with the quiet turning of a thoughtful mind. Imagine, you are walking through the Agora in Athens around the 5th century BCE. The air is warm and smells of baked bread and spilled wine. You can hear the endless hum of commerce and debate all around you. Your sandals are dusty from the walk into the city. Here, amidst the chaos of daily life, something new is taking root. You see small groups of men gathered, not to discuss the latest prophecy, but to ask a different kind of question. Why? Why does the sun cross the sky? Why do the tides ebb and flow? You listen as a philosopher, perhaps a student of a man named Thales, argues that the world isn't just a playground for the gods. He suggests it is a system, a set of rules that can be understood. This was the birth of reason, a new tool for understanding your world. For the first time, logic and observation became a competing source of truth. It was a profound shift in how you perceived reality. Imagine the feeling. For your entire life, you looked to the heavens for answers. Now people were suggesting you could find them by looking at the world around you, by using your own mind. It was a slow, creeping change. The authority of the gods, once absolute, now had a rival. This new way of thinking planted a seed of skepticism in the minds of ordinary people. This intellectual curiosity wasn't just for philosophers. You might find yourself at a symposium, a drinking party, reclining on a couch. The room feels stuffy, the air thick with the scent of olive oil from the lamps. You overhear someone quoting the historian Thucydides. He wrote about the great wars between the Greek city-states. But when you listen to his account, you notice something is missing. He rarely mentions the oracles. According to him, history wasn't shaped by cryptic prophecies. It was driven by human ambition, fear, and power. Your understanding of cause and effect begins to change. Suddenly, your own actions and the actions of your leaders feel much more important. The divine mystery that once cloaked the world was beginning to fray at the edges, revealing a pattern you could actually trace. Now, imagine the calendar has flipped forward a few hundred years. You are standing on a dusty road in Greece, watching a legion of Roman soldiers march past. Their leather armor creaks in unison, a rhythmic sound that speaks of discipline and power. The air feels heavy, not just with the summer heat, but with the weight of change. The world you knew, a collection of fiercely independent Greek cities, is being absorbed into a vast empire. And this political shift would have profound consequences for the ancient voices of the gods. Under Roman rule, the great oracles like the one at Delphi found themselves in a strange new position. Before, they were neutral arbiters consulted by kings and city-states on matters of war and peace. Their words could shift the balance of power across the entire Greek world. But now, you see that power belongs to Rome. The Delphic oracle, once a kingmaker, slowly transforms into something else. It becomes a respected cultural landmark, a piece of history that powerful Romans might visit, but not a force they would obey. You can feel the change in its status. The awe has been replaced by a kind of historical reverence, like visiting a famous old museum. The attitude of the Roman emperors toward the oracles varied. Some, wanting to appear cultured and respectful of Greek tradition, became patrons. They might fund repairs to the crumbling temples, but this was not about faith, it was about public relations. Then you have emperors like Nero. Imagine him arriving at Delphi, not as a humble seeker of wisdom, but as a conqueror and a collector. He didn't come to ask a question, he came to take the treasures. Historians tell us he looted hundreds of bronze and marble statues from the sanctuary. As you watch the treasures of your god being carted away, you realize the oracle is no longer sacred. It's just another asset in the vast portfolio of the Roman Empire. Its voice was fading because the world was no longer listening for it. The truth was, the center of your world had moved. Important decisions were no longer being debated in Athens or Sparta. They were being made in the marble halls of the Roman Senate. Your local politics, once a matter of life and death, now seems small. The fate of your town depended on the whims of an emperor hundreds of miles away. The oracle's influence dwindled because the questions it used to answer were now being decided by legions and laws, not by prophecies. The speaking water of the Castalian spring still flowed, but the political thirst for its wisdom was drying up. Through it all, people still sought answers, but the grand stage where the oracle once performed was being dismantled piece by piece. At first. But the rise of reason and the dominance of Rome were not the final blows. The most fatal challenge to the ancient oracles came from the voice of a new god. Imagine it is now the 4th century CE. You are living in a town somewhere in the Roman Empire. For years, you have noticed a new group of people. They meet in private homes, not in grand temples. They smell of simple soap and sincerity. They worship a single, exclusive God, and their faith is spreading with incredible speed. This is Christianity, and it would change your world forever. For a follower of this new faith, the oracles were not the voice of Apollo or Zeus. They were something far more sinister. They were the deceptive whispers of demons, intended to lead humanity astray. You might hear a Christian preacher in the marketplace. He doesn't just dismiss the Pythia's prophecies as nonsense, he condemns them as evil. This reframing was powerful. It turned 1,000 years of sacred tradition into a source of spiritual danger. For you, as someone who grew up with these stories, it creates a deep and unsettling conflict. The gods your ancestors revered are now being cast as your eternal enemies. This new religion grew until it became the official faith of the entire Roman Empire, and with that official power came a systematic effort to silence the old ways for good. You feel a chill in the air that has nothing to do with the weather. It is the chill of an era ending. In the late 4th century, the Emperor Theodosius issued a series of edicts. These were not suggestions, they were the law. Imagine being a priest at a small local shrine. One day, a Roman official arrives with a scroll. He reads the decree, his voice flat and unemotional. All pagan sacrifices are outlawed. All temples and sanctuaries are to be closed. Your life's work, your connection to the divine, is now a crime. This was the end. The laws effectively pulled the plug on the entire system of pagan worship that had sustained the oracles for centuries. The sacred fires were extinguished. The temple doors were barred. Don't worry, the people somehow managed, finding new ways to believe and new ways to hope. But for the oracles, it was over. Then, a final, brief flicker. From 361 to 363 CE, an emperor named Julian took the throne. You might have heard people whispering about him. They called him the apostate because he rejected Christianity and sought to revive the old pagan traditions. For a moment, it must have felt like a second chance, a brief sunrise after a long night. He believed the old gods could speak again, if only someone would ask the right question. As part of his grand pagan revival, the Emperor Julian sent a trusted envoy on a special mission. You are that envoy, entering the final days of the Delphic Oracle. Your journey to the slopes of Mount Parnassus has been long. As you ascend the final stretch of the sacred way, the air grows thin and cool. But the sanctuary you find is a shadow of its former glory. Weeds choke the flagstones. The grand treasury buildings are crumbling, their doors hanging from broken hinges. The place feels profoundly quiet, the silence of abandonment. You have come to consult the Pythia, to bring a message from the emperor, but it feels like you've arrived at a funeral. You are led into what remains of the Temple of Apollo. The air inside is musty and cold. The great wrought hall, once filled with precious offerings and the scent of incense, is now just a cavernous, empty space. Finally, you are brought before the Pythia. She delivers her response, but it is not a prophecy about the future of the empire. It is an epitaph for the oracle itself. Her voice is weak, the last echo in a dying hall. Tell the emperor the wrought hall has fallen to the ground. Phoebus no longer has his house, nor his mantic laurel, nor the prophetic spring. The speaking water is extinguished. The oracle had declared its own death. Shortly after, Julian was killed in a battle in Persia, and his dream of a pagan renaissance died with him. The silence became permanent. Though the temples are ruins and the voices are gone, the legacy of the oracles is embedded in the very language you speak today. When you describe a statement as thoughtful, you mean it is obscure and ambiguous, just like the Pythia's pronouncements. A mysterious prophetic warning might be called thoughtfulness, named for the legendary female prophets of the ancient world. Even the word flacaneth, which means brief or using few words, comes from this time. It's a reference to the people of Laconia, the region where Sparta was located, who were famous for their terse and direct speech. In the end, closing the sanctuaries did not extinguish the deeply human need to know what comes next. That impulse simply found new channels. So the next time you read your horoscope in the morning paper, or check an economic forecast, or follow political polling, you are participating in this ancient tradition. You are seeking certainty in an uncertain world. Today, our modern oracles are powered by silicon and code. We turn to predictive algorithms and artificial intelligence, feeding our questions into complex, opaque systems we call black boxes. These are our new prophetic springs. It proves that while the gods and the methods may change, your fundamental quest to pull back the curtain on tomorrow endures. And with that, the sacred rites are concluded. The last ecstatic utterance has faded, and the true work of the Prophetines, turning divine madness into mortal meaning, is done. We have learned that the power was not just in the message, but in its interpretation, a secret language of ambiguity that could build a nation or destroy a king. As you lay in the stillness, perhaps you can feel the weight of that secret knowledge, the responsibility of holding a truth that has two faces. Thank you for delving into these mysteries with us. To know we've shared this quiet exploration of the unspoken is a truly peaceful feeling. The ritual is complete, and its secrets now rest with you, the initiated. A light serves as your silent signal to the other keepers, a nod of acknowledgement across time to the interpreters who guarded these truths. To subscribe is to formally join this circle, to accept the responsibility of being summoned when the veil thins and another of history's great secrets is ready to be deciphered. Don't let this knowledge be a fleeting vision, make it a permanent part of your understanding. And now, let the sound of my voice fade into the background. Your duty as a keeper is over for the night. The Pythia has fallen silent, the rustling leaves of Dodona are still, and the double meanings have all been weighed. There is nothing left to interpret, nothing left to foresee, just the gentle pull of sleep. Let the sacred silence of the oracle's chamber settle over you and drift into a deep and tranquil rest. The secrets of the past will be kept safe until we meet again. Good night.